Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Uri, for joining us. We can see you have an injury. We're so grateful for you joining us.
Thank you.
I just want to say what a privilege it is to have you here. You are, of course, an incredible founder, sold your business in 2013 for $1 billion to Google, but you're also a mentor, you're a part of the community here, and soon to be an author. I want to start off by, because I think some of our conversation today is going to be around mobility. I know that many of you in this room had the privilege of an electric scooter tour yesterday, looking across the whole of Tel Aviv, this beautiful city. I'm curious, can I have a show of hands? Who has used an electric scooter before, whether it's here or around the world? Wow. Are we looking at the future of mobility there?
In Tel Aviv, absolutely yes. Rest of the world, probably not. Turns out that for all scooter operators, Tel Aviv is the most profitable city. And the reason is simple. It's small. There are bike lanes everywhere. And weather permitted.
And I want to just take us back in time. Take me back to the beginning of Waze and talk us through that journey, how you took it from the very early start, some of those inflection points, how you had the rapid growth all the way to acquisition.
So, the Waze journey was rather short comparing to most of the unicorns today. We started the company in 2008, but we started essentially the journey beforehand. And in 2008, we raised capital, and then we started to build the first version. Before that, the first version of the pre-Waze was running on a PDA. Now, this is 30-30, right? So if I would ask you, do you even know what a PDA is?
We have a show of hands. Does anyone know what a PDA is?
So for those that don't, long time ago, there were dinosaurs, and then PDAs, and then Nokia phones.
I remember PDAs.
And today we all have iPhones and Android, right? This is how fast things are evolving. And if we ask ourselves, so what does it mean for the future, right? So if I will have a time machine, I will send you back 10 years or 15 years. That means that I'm going to take away your iPhone, Facebook, Netflix, WhatsApp, pretty much everything. I'm not sure that you will survive. But what does it mean for the future, for the next decade? And the reality is that the pace of innovation is increasing, right? And so in 10 years down the road, there are things that are way beyond our ability to imagine. In fact, if you think of the top 10 companies of the world today, right, so Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Tesla and so forth, and you ask yourself, how many of them are going to remain in the top 10 a decade from now? 5. Now, we don't know which one. If we would know, I will tell you, sell short on the others and forget everything else that you are doing. The more important thing is which companies are going to take their place in the top 10. Some of them, you haven't heard their name yet.
And we were just chatting backstage with Steve from Forbes, and I think on behalf of him and many people in the world, you've heard this before, that people say that Waze saved their marriage, that it saved them from arguments. Is that right?
I heard so many stories of people coming to me and saying, you have no idea, you saved me from a nightmare traffic jams, or I owe you thousands of dollars in speeding tickets, or you saved my marriage. And the first time that I heard that, I say, what? I say, well, because of Waze, we don't argue anymore in the car, so you saved my marriage.
Well, I think you definitely saved my marriage, because I have the worst sense of direction, so thank you so much. I want to talk about community as well. Your acquisition was some years back, but what have you been doing since then, and how have you been helping to grow the tech scene here?
So I probably have two very strong characters in my mind. One of them is an entrepreneur, which is obvious. The other one that is less obvious is a teacher. And usually these combinations don't work together. So I'm mentoring CEOs. I'm guiding and teaching entrepreneurs, because for me, I'm fulfilling my destiny, right? It's my mission to help entrepreneurs, and essentially entrepreneurs are the ones that are changing the world. And so I started as, at the IDC in Herzliya in Tel Aviv University, and later on I And now I wrote a book, right, that surprisingly is called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution.
And I want to ask you about that book, because this book is a pandemic project, is that right?
It's, I definitely would say that the pandemic accelerated the writing, right? So I was traveling less, and I had more time available for me to write the book. So it was completed during the pandemic. And I think that essentially, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working at the high-tech industry, if you are doing any sort of business, this book is probably for you.
And there is an audience right here in front of us of leaders of the future. Can you share some of the top tips you have from that book, talking about failure? What can you share with our audience today?
So, I spoke with many entrepreneurs that their startup failed, and asked them why, what happened, right? And about half said the team was not right. And so I kept on asking, okay, what do you mean the team was not right? And some of them said, okay, we had this guy not good enough, or this guy not good. So not good enough was one reason. Another reason that I heard often was we had communication issues, right? Or something that I actually called ego management issues. And then I asked them the most important question: when did you know that the team is not right? All of them knew within the first month. All of them knew within the first month.
So you're talking about gut feeling there, then, trusting your gut.
And then you say, wait a minute, if you knew within the first month, the problem was not that the team was not right. The problem was that the CEO did not make a hard decision. Now, firing someone is a hard decision. And one of the chapters in my book called Firing and Hiring. Not hiring and firing and hiring, because firing is a hard decision. Hiring is easy decision. And people ask me often, so how do you know, right? And so the reality is that we do know. But I would offer you the following practice that tend to be the most effective one. 1 month after you hire someone, ask yourself very simple question. Knowing what I know today, would I hire this person? Now, if the answer is no, then you know what to do, right? And if the answer is yes, by the way, then give them more share options.
That is very, very bold. Looking back on your experience, you were a co-founder at Waze, but you've also been involved in other startups. You're mentoring, is it 12 startups at the moment? What other failures are you seeing people making?
So often people ask me, what's the biggest failure? And it's coming, right? I'm the one that is looking into the future. So if there was a time machine, I will go into the future and not into the past. And always I'm looking more into the future. So the biggest failure is yet to come. I think that some of my startups failed, and in most cases it was the team was not right. And if you would ask me if I'm going to repeat the same mistakes again, most likely yes. So you don't know. You don't know, right? So you hire someone, or you engage with someone, and you think that this is it, and just compare that to going to a date, right? You go to a date, and you think that she is the one, and then you even get married, right? And still in Tel Aviv, 50% of the couples divorce, right? And so even in that, we are not that great in making decisions. Or we are great in making decisions, we are making the right decisions, and then reality changes.
So I want to push you more on failure. Now, speaking on behalf of European mentality, let's say, I was an entrepreneur myself in the past, and what I always hear time and time again, particularly from Europeans, is this fear of failure. And yet, earlier this morning, we've heard so many of the panels and the people on stage talking about this incredible Israeli characteristic of entrepreneurship. How can people in the rest of the world learn from that Israeli, put the fear to one side, don't worry about failure, just go and do it? How would you advise someone who has that fear?
So look, building a startup is a journey of failures, right? And it's also a roller coaster journey, but it's a journey of failures, right? Because we have something in our mind and we are 100% sure that this is how it's going to work, right? And we try it and it doesn't. and then we try something else. So once you realize that building a startup is a journey of failures, then there are two immediate conclusions. One is that if you're afraid to fail, in reality, you already failed. Albert Einstein used to say that if you haven't failed, that's because you haven't tried anything new before. If you're going to try new things, you will fail. The most important thing is to recover fast, right? And so if you assume that your roadmap of the product is just a list of experiments that you're going to make, or your go-to-market strategy is a list of experiments that you're going to make, then the faster that you fail, you actually have more time for the next experiments and the next experiments, and essentially you increase the likelihood of being successful. And once you embrace that, then you start to build the DNA of the company and the culture of the company that not only accept failures, encourage failures. Failure is not a person, it's an event. We can learn from the event and we can improve for the next time. But the reality is that if we are building something from new, no one has done that before, we have the conviction that we know what we are doing, but the reality is that we don't.
So I want to just touch on community. Now, you mentioned you wrote your book during the pandemic, and I'm curious to ask our audience here, how many of you are going in the office? How many of you are going in? Okay, quite a lot of you. How many full-time? Show of hands. Interesting. How many people are not going in at all, completely remote? Still a few. So you have quite an interesting perspective on this. You've started businesses, you're mentoring businesses. I'm hearing from people in Tel Aviv, people are going to the office. As someone who's built businesses, how important do you think it is to be physically in the room?
So I would say that if we're going to meet here again next year or a couple of years down the road, the pandemic is going to be a dark part of the history that everyone was locked down unnecessarily. The reality is that when you think of your business, there are two things that you're building from the beginning, right? The value proposition, right? So the problem you're solving or the product, and the DNA of the company, the working place that you spend most of your time and your employees are spending most of the time and so forth. You cannot build the DNA of the company remotely. You can build it only with face-to-face. So if you still have hesitations whether or not you should go to the office, if you want to build successful companies that will last 100 years, start with the DNA. And that happens face-to-face.
And do you think that fundamentally the way that we work has changed, or do you see it retreating back to the world before?
We are going to come back. We are people, we are not machines. And we need the face-to-face communication, and we need to be back at the office.
Yeah. And tell me about the future as well, because Waze for you was some time ago. You're working with these startups today. What are you most excited about in terms of technology, and where do you see us heading?
You know, it was never about technology for me. It was about solving problem, right? So if you will tell me, okay, here is a big problem that it's worth solving, then I already like that.
Yeah. And tell me more about the book as well. Tell me when people can look forward to reading it and some more highlights.
So essentially, the book, by the way, you can pre-order it already, right? So it's and it's going to be printed towards the end of the year. And it's essentially a mix of stories and very key takeaways for entrepreneurs or business people or high-tech industries, and so multiple chapters about building a startups, about working in phases, about go-to-market, product-market fit, understanding users. Right here is a very interesting story. Some years back, I was participating at a conference, and the speaker before me was Steve Wozniak, right? And so we had a dinner before, and I took my iPhone and I took a selfie. I took my iPhone out and took a selfie of both of us. And on the iPhone, there are two ways that you can take a picture, right? You can click on the screen, or you can click on the volume bottom on the side, right? And I used the bottom, the volume bottom on the side, and he told me, finally. And I said, finally what? And said, finally someone using it the way that I meant it to be. And we are different users, right? And we have very hard time, and this is in particular for people that are engaged with the product, we have very hard time to understand that not all the people are like us. So we are an amazing sample of one person. Yeah. That's it. And how do you know what other people think or do? You watch them, and then you ask them why.
I think that is a fantastic moment to wrap up. I want to say thank you for saving marriages, saving people like me who have no sense of direction, and helping the future. Thank you, Uri.
Thank you.